So when it comes to having a good financial game plan, sometimes we think it's a very complex process and we have to know all these big terminologies and have all these fancy accounts. And the reality is, it's really simple to actually accomplish our financial futures. I tell people that there are 5 simple steps that you should take. The first one, first and foremost, is spend less than you make. Bottom line, spend less than you make. What we do is we tend to spend more than we make, and that's how we get caught up living lives that are relying on credit cards and loans to get there. If you make it a habit right out of the gate to say, okay, whatever my income is going to be, I'm going to carve off the first 10%, pay my tithes or my offerings. I'm going to carve off the next 10% to go towards my savings, and then I'm going to spend the remaining 80%. You'll find yourself very quickly in a situation where you're not behind the 8 ball. You're not constantly living paycheck to paycheck. We get in the habit of saving and saving for ourselves first, then we don't have to rely on anybody else. The next thing is just avoid the use of debt. I'm not here to say debt is a bad thing, but what happens a lot of times, we use debt for things that do not appreciate. I jokingly say, if the last thing you charged on your credit card were those Air Jordans when Michael Jordan was still playing, yet you're still making payments on it, that wasn't a good use of debt. When you're going to use debt, use it for things that appreciate, such as buying a home, most of the time, buying artwork, investing in a business. Debt is designed to be a tool, not something that you have to rely on. And sometimes we get so caught up using debt as something other than just a tool that we can't shake it, and we get into this perpetual trap where we're trapped by it. So only use debt, avoid it at all costs. But if you need to use debt, make sure you're using it for things that are beneficial, that are going to help you grow, and make sure that you don't become a slave to it, but you're able to stop using it whenever you need to. One of the things we got to keep in mind is maintain liquidity. The saying that we all know so well is cash is king, and that's never been truer than it is today. People that have cash are getting the opportunities, whether it's buying a house for cash, whether it's going out and buying a new car. You get the best deals if you're paying all cash. Cash is king, so make sure you have liquid cash available. We generally recommend having anywhere from 6 to 12 months worth of your expenses in reserve. That way you don't have to rely on the credit, but generally speaking, not everybody can have that right out of the gate. So start off with whatever you can and take the time to save it up, but have that cash. As a financial planner and an investment manager, people always want to have these exotic portfolios with 8 and 10% returns. And I say that's great, but first have your cash savings in place, because when that portfolio starts to go up and down with the stock market, you can always rely on that cash. Make sure you set long-term goals. Don't just rely on what you're going to do next paycheck and next month, or what you're going to buy for Christmas, or where you're going to go for New Year's or for spring break. Set long-term goals. We have to have a goal hanging in front of us to make sure that we have something to keep us motivated and to keep us accountable. If you don't have a goal, the saying goes, if you don't know where you're going, that's exactly where you're going to end up, someplace you don't know. So establish long-term goals. Establish them up front. Don't wait until you have the money. I hear that all the time. People say, well, when I have money, I'm going to come to you. No, establish your goals and have them set. That way when the money is there, all that's going to be there is to fund the goals, but the goals are already in place. And establish short-term goals, which are going to be generally less than 12 months, but sometimes people will say up to 3 years. Short-term goals rely on you to have liquid investments that you can get to relatively easy. That may be a down payment on a house or a car. It may be paying for college, whatever it may be. Those are things that you're going to need that money in the next 3 years. Mid-range goals are going to be anywhere up to 7 years. Because you got a little bit more time on your hands, you can actually take the time to invest in things that may not be as accessible. You might use stocks or bonds, you may invest in partnerships, but you now have the ability to invest in things and not have to have that money readily available. And then long-term goals, 7 years or longer. And these are goals where you're not going to necessarily need the money for the next 7 years, so you don't necessarily have to have the liquidity we talked about earlier. But regardless of what goals you set up, make sure you actually take the time to set them and don't just rely on what's on tomorrow. And then the tip that I give, being Agape planning partners and focusing on stewardship, you have to make sure that you remember that God owns all of it. I always kind of jokingly say that when I borrow your tool, when I borrow a tool from my neighbor, always return it in a better condition than I borrowed it. But when it's my own tools, they're all rusted. I just leave them outside in the rain. We just tend to take better care of other people's property than we do ourselves. And when we're reminded that our financial resources are not ours, they're God's, and we're just using them, we would tend to take a better job, do a better job of taking care of it. So remember that He owns it all, and He's equipping us to be stewards of those resources. And as stewards of those resources, we need to be doing the best thing for them. Those 5 tips are actually provided courtesy of Ron Blue, who is a Christian financial advisor who established a company, Ron Blue and Company. Did very well. Now he's a director of Kingdom Advisors, which is an organization that we're part of. As a certified financial planner, I can give you all the fancy terminology to get you to your goals, but sometimes it takes things as simple as just those 5 steps.